Once I'd hopped and tripped and felt my way like a blind man through the woods and fog and re-emerged into the world of sun and light. I was surprised to find the sun sinking and the light going red. Somehow the whole day had slipped away. At the pub, my dad was waiting for me, a black-as-night beer and his open laptop on the table in front of him. I underwent a brief interrogation about how I'd gotten to the house and who had taken me there. And because the easiest kind of lying is when you leave things out of a story rather than make them up, I passed with flying colors.
So, how was the house?
Trashed.
Guess it's been a long time since your grandpa lived there, huh?
Yeah, or anyone.
I can see you're disappointed.
Well, I didn't come thousands of miles looking for a house full of creepy garbage.
So what you going to do?
Find people to talk to. Someone will know what happened to the kids who used to live there. I figure a few of them must be still alive, on the mainland, if not around here. In a nursing home or something.
Sure, that's an idea. So do you feel like you're starting to get a better handle on who your grandpa was, being here?
I don't know. I guess so. It's just an island, you know?
Exactly.
What about you?
Me? I gave up trying to understand my father a long time ago. I never dug too deep, because I was afraid of what I'd find.
You mean about the war?
No. Your grandpa kept those secrets because they were painful. I understood that. I mean about the traveling, him being gone all the time. What he was really doing. I think your aunt and I both thought that there was another woman. Maybe more than one.
That's crazy, Dad.
We found a letter once. It was from a woman whose name we didn't know, addressed to your grandfather. I love you. I miss you. When are you coming back? That kind of thing. Seedy, lipstick on the collar type stuff. I'll never forget it. We tore up the letter and flushed it down the toilet. Never found another one either. Guess he was more careful after that.
I didn't know what to say. I couldn't look at my father.
I'm sorry, Jake. This must be hard to hear. I know how much you worshipped him.
I don't worship anyone.
Okay. I didn't want you to be surprised, that's all.
I grabbed my jacket and slung it over my shoulder.
What are you doing? Dinner's on the way.
You're wrong about him, and I'm going to prove it.
Okay. I hope you do.
I slammed out of the priest hole and started walking, heading nowhere in particular. Sometimes you just need to go through a door. It was true, of course, what my dad had said. I did worship my grandfather. There were things about him that I needed to be true, and his being an adulterer was not one of them. When I was a kid, Grandpa Portman's fantastic stories meant it was possible to live a magical life. Even after I stopped believing them, there was still something magical about my grandfather. To have endured all the horrors he did, to have seen the worst of humanity and have your life made unrecognizable by it, to come out of all that the honorable and good and brave person I knew him to be. That was magical. So I couldn't believe he was a liar and a cheater and a bad father, because if Grandpa Portman wasn't honorable and good, I wasn't sure anyone could be. The museum's doors were open and its lights were on, but no one seemed to be inside. I'd gone there to find the curator, hoping he knew a thing or two about the island's history and people, and could shed some light on the empty house and the whereabouts of its former inhabitants. Figuring he'd just stepped out for a minute, the crowds weren't exactly kicking down his door, I wandered into the sanctuary to kill time, checking out museum displays. One exhibit stood out from the rest. When I looked inside, I think I actually gasped, and for one panicky second thought, "Monster!" Because I had suddenly and unexpectedly come face to face with a blackened corpse. Its shrunken body bore an uncanny resemblance to the creatures that had haunted my dreams, as did the color of its flesh, which was like something that had been spit-roasted over a flame. But when the body failed to come alive and scar my mind forever by breaking the glass and going for my jugular, my initial panic subsided. It was just a museum display, albeit an excessively morbid one.
I see you've met the old man.
I turned to see the curator striding in my direction.
You handled it pretty well. I've seen grown men faint that away. Martin Paget. Don't believe I caught your name the other day.
Jacob Portman. Who's this? Wales' most famous murder victim?
Well, he might be that too. Though I've never thought of him that way. He's our island's senior-most resident, better known in archaeological circles as Cairnhome Man. Though to us, he's just the old man. More than 2,700 years old to be exact. Though he was only 16 when he died. So he's rather a young old man, really.
2,700? But he looks so...
That's what happens when you spend your golden years in a place where oxygen and bacteria can't exist. Like the underside of our bog. It's a regular fountain of youth down there. Provided you're already dead, that is.
That's where you found him, the bog?
Not me. Turf cutters did, digging for a peat by the big stone cairn out there, back in the 70s. He looked so fresh, they thought there might be a killer loose on Cairnhome. Till the cops had a look at the Stone Age bow in his hand and the noose of human hair around his neck. They don't make him like that anymore.
Sounds like a human sacrifice or something.
Exactly. He was done in by a combination of strangulation, drowning, disembowelment and a blow to the head. Seems rather like overkill, don't you think?
I guess so.
He guesses so. Now, I'd be happy to show you the rest of my collection, but I'm afraid it's shutting up time. If you'd like to come back tomorrow, however...
Actually, I was hoping you might know something. It's about the house I mentioned this morning. I went to see it.
I thought I'd scare you off it. How's our haunted mansion faring these days? Still standing?
It certainly is. The people that lived there, do you have any idea what happened to them?
They're dead. Happened a long time ago. No one's lived there since the war.
What do you mean? What war?
When we say the war around here, my boy, there's only one that we mean. The second. It was a German air raid that got him, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that can't be right.
In those days there was an anti-aircraft gun batters at the far tip of the island, past the wood where the house is. It made Cairnhome a legitimate military target. Not that legitimate mattered much to the Germans one way or another, mind you. Anyway, one of the bombs went off track and, well, nasty luck.
That can't be right.
Why don't you sit down and let me fix you some tea? You look a bit off the mark.
No, I'll be fine. But if there's anything else you can tell me about the attack, I'd be grateful.
About that, I'm curious. You say your grandfather lived here. He never mentioned it.
I'm curious about that too. I guess it must have been after his time. Did it happen late in the war or early?
I'm ashamed to admit I don't know. But if you're keen, I can introduce you to someone who does. My uncle Oggie. He's 83, lived here his whole life, still sharp as tack. If we catch him before Father Ted comes on the telly, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to tell you anything you like.
10 minutes later, Martin and I were wedged deep in an overstuffed sofa in Oggie's living room. Oggie sat facing us in a threadbare blazer and pyjama bottoms, as if he'd been expecting company, just not pants-worthy company, and rocked endlessly in a plastic-covered easy chair as he talked.
Sure, I remember them. Art collection of people. We see them in town now and again. The children, sometimes they're minter women too, buying milk and medicine and what have you. You'd say good morning and they'd look the other way. Kept to themselves they did, off in that big house. All I could say is that they weren't your regular sort of orphan children. This lot was different. Some of them couldn't even speak the king's English or any English for that matter.
Because they weren't really orphans. They were refugees from other countries. Poland, Austria, Czechoslovakia.
So, Uncle, the bombing?
Oh, keep your hair on. Yes, the goddamn Jerrys. Who could forget them?
He launched into a long-winded description of what life on the island was like under threat of German air raids. The blaring sirens, the panicked scrambles for shelter. They prepared as best they could, but never really thought they'd get hit. But one night, the bombs began to fall.
The noise was dreadful. It was like giants stamping across the island. It seemed to go on for ages. They gave us a hell of a pounding, though. No one in town was killed, thank heaven. Can't say the same for the poor souls of the orphan home. One bomb was all it took.
Do you remember what happened?
I can tell you the exact day. It was the 3rd of September, 1940.
The air seemed to go out of the room. I flashed to my grandfather's ashen face, his lips just barely moving, uttering those very words. September 3rd, 1940. I walked back by moonlight, feeling small. I found my dad in the pub at the same table where he'd been, a half-eaten plate of beef and gravy congealing into grease before him.
Look who's back. I saved your dinner for you.
I'm not hungry. I tossed and turned most of the night. I couldn't stop thinking about the letters from this other woman and the one I'd found a month ago from Miss Peregrine. The thought that kept me awake was this: what if they were the same woman? The postmark on Miss Peregrine's letter was 15 years old, but by all accounts she'd been blown into the stratosphere back in 1940. To my mind, that left two possible explanations. Either my grandfather had been corresponding with a dead person, admittedly unlikely, or the person who wrote the letter was not in fact Miss Peregrine, but someone who was using her identity to disguise her own. It was all just guesswork, though. I didn't know, and there was no one to ask. Anyone who might have had the answers was long dead. In less than 24 hours, the whole trip had become pointless. I fell into an uneasy sleep. At dawn, I woke to the sound of something in my room. Rolling over to see what it was, I bolted upright in bed. A large bird was perched on my dresser, staring me down. It had a sleek head feathered in grey and talons that clacked on the wooden dresser as it sidled back and forth along the edge, as if to get a better look at me. I stared rigidly, wondering if this could be a dream. I called out for my dad, and at the sound of my voice the bird launched itself off the dresser. I threw my arm across my face and rolled away, and then I peeked again, and it was gone, flown out the open window. My dad stumbled in, bleary-eyed.
What's going on?
I showed him the talon marks on the dresser and a feather that had landed on the floor.
God, that's weird. Peregrines almost never come this close to humans.
Did you say peregrines? He held up the feather.
A peregrine falcon. They're amazing creatures. The fastest birds on Earth. They're like shapeshifters. The way they streamline their bodies in the air.
The name was just a weird coincidence, but it left me with an uncanny feeling I couldn't shake. Over breakfast I began to wonder if I'd given up too easily. Though it was true there was no one left alive whom I could talk to about my grandfather, there was still the house, a lot of it unexplored. If it had ever held answers about my grandfather, in the form of letters maybe, or a photo album or a diary. They'd probably burned up or rotted away decades ago. But if I left the island without making sure, I knew I'd regret it. And that is how someone who is unusually susceptible to nightmares, night terrors, the creeps, the willies, and seeing things that aren't really there, talks himself into making one last trip to the abandoned, almost certainly haunted house, where a dozen or more children met their untimely end.